Good morning. Thank you for attending this important time of remembrance and reflection as we look back on the 20th anniversary of September 11th. There are many people in the audience I'd like to thank for coming. We have elected officials, dignitaries. I do want to acknowledge right now Ann Fahn from Senator Warner's office and Stephanie Ospino from Congressman Connolly's office. Ladies and gentlemen, at this time, can you please stand for the presentation of the colors? Ladies and gentlemen, if you can join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Order! March! Right! Right! On!
Thank you. At this point, I'd like to introduce Nicholas Wiltshire, who is going to sing the Star Spangled Banner.
Oh, say can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave for the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Thank you very much, Nicholas. Please be seated for those who have seats. I really want to thank everyone again for coming out today on such a momentous occasion to remember September 11th. On this day tomorrow, 20 years ago, our country changed forever. Nearly 3,000 people lost their lives when terrorists attacked our nation. Across Prince William County, we lost 22 residents, more than any other in the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area. Today, we remember and honor those people we lost in the terror attacks on September 11th, 2001. We remember and honor those we lost and the families and friends they left behind. It's hard to believe that it's been 20 years since that tragic day when the first plane hit the North Tower of the World Trade Center at 8:46 a.m. Minutes later, another plane crashed into the South Tower at 9:03 a.m. The third plane struck the Pentagon at 9:37 a.m. And at 10:03 a.m., the fourth hijacked plane crashed in rural Pennsylvania as the passengers, the heroes on that plane, overpowered the hijackers to avoid more loss of life. Of the 2,977 victims from that day, 246 were on the four planes, 2,606 were in the World Trade Center, and 125 perished at the Pentagon. Today we pause at this Liberty Memorial to pay homage to our loved ones, friends, and neighbors who made the ultimate sacrifice 20 years ago. Their names are inscribed on the Fountain Memorial, and I'm going to read them. Sergeant First Class John J. Chada, U.S. Army retired. Petty Officer Third Class Jamie L. Fallon, U.S. Navy. Amelia V. Fields. Lieutenant Colonel Robert J. Himmel, United Air Force retired. Sergeant Mayor Lacey B. Ivory, U.S. Army. Judith L. Jones. David W. Lachek, James T. Lynch, Jr., Jean E. Malloy, Robert J. Maxwell, Molly L. McKinsey, Craig J. Miller, Diana B. Pedro, Rhonda S. Rasmussen, Edward V. Rowenhorst, Judy Roulette, Donna D. Simmons, Jeff L. Simpson, Cheryl D. Sincock, Chief Information Systems Technician Greg H. Smallwood, U.S. Navy, Sergeant Major Larry F. L. Strickland, U.S. Army, and Sandra L. White. While we remember our fellow residents whose lives were lost on September 11th, we must also remember the brave fire and rescue members who risked and sacrificed their lives to save others. And in respect to that, long before there were telephones and radios in use in America, fire departments utilized the telegraph to receive fire alarms from those once familiar red fire alarm boxes which stood on practically every street corner of our nation's cities. When a firefighter passed away, the fire alarm office, the forerunner of today's computerized fire communication center, would tap out a special signal, 555, over the telegraph fire alarm circuits, which went to all the station houses. Done for the purpose of notifications as a sign of honor and respect, such symbolism has been a long-honored fire service tradition which still continues today. Today, we are going to take a moment to honor those lost on 9/11 with the ringing of the bell. That was Jeff Howdyshell of our Fire and Rescue Department. We must take time to reflect and never forget how on this day 20 years ago, our lives, our country, and our community changed forever. Today we are going to hear from some speakers. I know we all have a story from September 11th. Those who were alive those days, I know everyone knows where they were. We have just a few speakers who can talk to their own personal experience of what that was like in their own remembrances. At this point, I would like to introduce Mr. Bill Milne as our next speaker. He served in the Coast Guard and responded to the Twin Towers in the New York attack. If you could help me welcome Mr. Milne.
Thank you, Chair Wheeler. Can everybody hear me in the back? Thumbs up? Okay. This morning we've set aside time to remember. Remember those we've lost their lives at the World Trade Center, at the Pentagon, and in the fields of Shanksville, Pennsylvania. Most of you know me as Bill Milne, Chair of the Planning Commission here in Prince William. However, my comments this morning are as Captain retired U.S. Coast Guard Bill Milne, commanding a ship in New York Harbor in the days of September 11th and for almost 18 months after that. It was a Tuesday morning. Millions of people, men and women, readying themselves for work. Some made their way to the Twin Towers, the signature of New York City. Many went to work from the local area here to the Pentagon. Others used the metro, the VRE, and slugged in to Washington, D.C. Even Congress was in session after an August recess. By all accounts, Tuesday was just like today, sunny, 68 degrees and a light breeze. As in any other day, we all viewed it as normal and routine. It's 7:59. American Airlines Flight 11 departs from Boston. 15 minutes later, United Airline Flight 175 also departs from Boston. It's 8:20. American Airlines Flight 77 departs from Dulles International Airport. These three planes are headed for LA. 8:42, United Airlines Flight 93 departs from Newark, headed to San Francisco. 4 planes, 265 people, all heading to the West Coast. Best weather conditions for a safe journey. Then, remarkably, a voice mistakenly announces over the PA system, "We have some planes. Just stay quiet, you'll be okay." We are returning to the airport, and as we all know, that never happened. 20 years ago, 265 people aboard those 4 flights had no idea their life was about to end. Yet 19 people aboard those same flights knew well in advance that their life was going to end. No one could have predicted how cowardly their actions would impact our lives back then and all the way through today. In addition to those 4 planes, we lost 125 people at the Pentagon, and in a few moments you'll hear from the spouse of one of those that was lost. More than 400 emergency responders and 2,750 people were lost at the World Trade Center, and another 40 through heroic fashion in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. Unfortunately, the death toll from 9/11 continues to rise. Many have succumbed to the related illnesses of what's left over in New York City. So while many remain angered and heartbroken, others will choose to forgive. While the young will learn in history books, today I want to share with you my personal experiences of that in the days that follow. As I previously mentioned, it's a Tuesday morning. I'm sipping coffee in the wardroom on my ship. Someone comes to tell me that one of the planes has hit one of the towers. Like all of us, we spent time, we turned on the TV and watched in horror, watched black smoke pour out of the North Tower. Many of you were just starting school. Many of you were starting to go to work. Still engaged in the improbable thought that a commercial plane could hit one of the towers, I watched Flight 175 fly into the South Tower, explode into a massive fireball at 9:03. 63 lives in that plane were lost, as were many inside. Both towers are now in flames. What took 4 years to man to build, took hours to destroy, and shockingly, only took 12 seconds to fall to the ground. Without a second thought, my engineer officer readied the ship with fuel, water. My first lieutenant armed many on the ship to guard the ship, and then we got underway. The Coast Guard response to this was no different than any other tragic event that we have faced in our careers. We deployed and sailed to Ambrose Tower. Very little seemed to be out of the ordinary at the time. Then we headed up the channel to Ambrose, Anchorage, which is just south of the Verrazano Bridge, And there are a lot of deep drafts that are anchored, more so than I've ever seen in my time. We pass under the bridge. We get into New York Harbor proper. It is eerily quiet. For those who've been there, know it is about one of the busiest harbors around. Nothing is moving except Coast Guard boats, the water taxis for New York to help, and then police from New Jersey and police from New York fireboat, or the boats. We pass the Statue of Liberty, Manhattan in front of us. The glow of fire, smell of pumice, plume of smoke heading right over the ship. We're taking it all in, and it struck us at that point the Manhattan skyline was going to be different. The smoke, the smell went on for days, constantly invading the air intakes of the ship. These are the things I remember. New York water taxi, police boats, Coast Guard vessels are transporting firefighters, first responders, police officers to lower Manhattan from places like New Jersey, Connecticut, the Bronx, Staten Island. I remember deploying, deploying assets to protect the United Nations, sending boats up the river to the Indian nuclear power plant to protect that. I remember boat crews delivering water, supplies, pizzas and stuff supported by the community. Once at Ground Zero, my crew and I remember watching first responders struggle to breathe due to the soot, the dust, the smoke in the air. Like many of you, I saw the skyline buildings with broken windows, walking through inches of gray ash, remnants of glass lying everywhere, people's lives on display in the streets as shreds of paper are laying all over the place. I remember fire hoses littering the covered streets in gray sludge that was once concrete. Policemen standing on every corner, directing traffic to keep the massive rescue effort going. I want you to visualize soot-covered firemen with red helmets looking like ants on a massive hill, on a massive pile of concrete. So high, you wonder how anyone could survive. Visualize welders tirelessly cutting through the steel to try to gain access to the next spot where there might be a survivor. Visualize the soot-torn flag, which we've all seen on TV, hanging from a crane. It told us that America was battered but not broken. Visualize first responders also covered in pumice, sitting on the side of the road, anguished for their friends, their shipmates, simply exhausted, just needing a few minutes of rest and maybe a little bit of water to forge on. Visualize barges, tugging barges, heading from Ground Zero to Staten Island, loaded with the debris from Ground Zero. For weeks, months, some of the remnants which stand behind us or in front of you today. As the days wore on, activity increased. We allowed fuel oil barges to continue up the Hudson for home heating oil, water taxis to continue to ferry people to the upper part of Manhattan to work. Then came the validations of the deep draft, or tankers as you know them. We went on board with armed guards to make sure we had control of the ship, both in the engine room and the bridge, and escorted them all the way into Staten Island and New Jersey. Yes, 20 years ago was an unprecedented time for our nation. Never had we experienced terrorism at this level on our homeland, and as a nation, we were unprepared. Unfortunately, those 19 were well prepared, patient, and well disciplined. We learned how porous our borders were, how vulnerable our intelligence systems had become, and how incompatible our communication systems across federal, state, and local government. On the bright side, no matter the size of the catastrophic event, our nation knows how to come together in times of trial. Yes, we learned a lot that day and the weeks following. There were many mornings I sat on the bridge of the ship with the Statue of Liberty to my left or my port side, Manhattan skyline directly ahead, and the barges passing up and down, heading over to drop off the debris. So after 4 years, 4 decades in the military service, I often wondered, what was I supposed to learn from this? As dawn approached the next day, I followed. It struck me I was seeing the beginning of a new day that promised of hope and strength. Hope that would guide us to a better future, strength that would cement ourselves and our resolve as a nation. I have visited Shanksville. I have visited the Pentagon. It took me 17 years to go back to New York. It was a sobering experience. While history will not let us forget this day, know that each morning brings a day of hope. Remember the past, but I want you all to live for the future. God bless and Semper Paratus. At this time, I'd like to introduce Miss Brenda Lynch. Miss Lynch lost her husband in the Pentagon and has the courage to be here to share her story today. Thank you.
September 11th, 2001, 20 years ago tomorrow, the day that changed our lives forever, some of us more than others. I lost my husband that day and my life changed. We had planned things to do after we both retired, and that was just not going to happen. Sometimes it feels like it's been 20 years and other times it feels like it was yesterday. But life goes on. September 11th, 2001 is a new timeline in our lives now. Just like the other dates in our country's history, if you ask someone where they were on September 11th, they can tell you where they were and what they were doing when our nation was attacked in our own backyard. Sometimes if I'm talking to someone about something happened in my life, I would say, well, Jimmy was still here, so it was before September 11th. Or Jimmy isn't with us anymore, so it was after September 11th. I can remember that day as well as the rest of that year, like they were yesterday. We need to make sure that generations also remember what happened that day. However, there was some good that came out of that day. It brought this country together. I personally met some really great friends, especially in this county, that I might not have ever met if it had not been for planning this memorial. I cherish those friendships, and I don't believe those friendships will ever be broken. Today, let us remember our loved ones, our husbands, fathers, mothers, sisters, brothers, friends, and neighbors who we lost that day 20 years ago. They were all at work or at play, enjoying their freedom just like any other day. We as a country should never take that freedom for granted. Now I would like to introduce Dr. Jeff Carter to give the benediction.
It is an honor to be here this morning and rejoin my Prince William County family in remembering the events of September 11th, 2001. Having served as chaplain of the Prince William County Fire and Rescue for the first 10 years since September 11th, 2001, to mark this day on the 20th anniversary is particularly poignant for me. In this time, may we be united in a moment of silence, a moment of deep silence, a moment to acknowledge, a moment to remember, a moment to honor, a moment to be together, unified as one people with one story. I invite you to join me in a moment of silence, and I will end that moment of silence with a prayer. Let us be silent together and remember. gracious God, we remember. We remember lives of loved ones, lives of friends, community life, and our own life prior to September 11th. We give thanks for the lives of those we remember and for their reflections seen in growing children, flagpoles standing as sentinels to the memorial, to those recruits joining hero ranks to uphold public safety. We remember life, all that was, and the passing of time, and all that has become. On this day, we remember a morning 20 years ago born of innocence, a day shrouded in darkness, and weeks, if not years, of reckoning. Reckoning the goodness of heroes rushing to help with the evil of cowards seeking ruin. Reckoning images of terror seen day by day and year by year, and the full knowledge that an image does not tell the totality of our story. Reckoning the pain of loss with the hope in our continuing reckoning, making sense of the senseless. This day 20 years ago seems like but yesterday, and this moment filled with distinct memories and the memory of moving forward. May the memory of this day rest as a reminder of the past, as it offers deep meaning to the present day. For we remember. We remember these last 20 years like a shattered glass put back together. Pieces assembled imperfectly, some as if they were never separated and still others still missing. To put things together, from old patterns, new ways, from weakness, strength, from helplessness, resiliency, and through it all to find your guiding light, one of courage and hope and peace. On this day, we do remember, carrying with us inspired stories of those who have gone before us, seeking always the greater good, and never relenting in how we invest our memories of this day and those we lost to give life greater meaning and purpose and direction. For in our unity, our togetherness, this our common story, there is inspiration, there is power, and yes, there is blessing. May it be so. Amen.
God bless America, land that I love. Stand beside her and guide her through the night with a light from above. From the mountains to the prairies, to the ocean white with foam. God bless America, my home, sweet home. God bless America, my home, sweet home.
We are now going to have the first responders place a wreath at the base of the fountain. Thank you all for coming. That concludes our ceremony today, but I encourage everyone to stay around, enjoy the space. It's for remembrance, and it's always here. So thank you for coming out today.